So if our speakers would come up and take a seat at the table, and let's have Q&A free for all. We have mics up there.
It's really neat.
Do we have any, those, we can use those as roving mics, right?
Sure.
So would a couple of people volunteer just to take the mics off the stands and just pass them around? But go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. You know, my question was actually for Dr. Phillips. He's not up there, but maybe he's left, I don't know, but maybe you folks would know. One of his co-authors on a paper, a recent paper, was Dr. Hutira at Boston University, and she spoke at Brookline Green Space Alliance meeting about a month ago. And one very discouraging thing she said is that in spite of the potential for tree canopies, et cetera, to deal with carbon and all those problems, just the huge impact of fossil fuel use in the greater Boston area is orders of magnitude more damaging than any possible tree cover could deal with. And I just wonder if anybody could have any ideas on that particular problem.
Take a stab at that one. Sorry. I could. You take a stab at it.
Well, when you have 7 billion people on the planet, I get an image in my mind of like inoculating a test tube with nutrient broth with bacteria and seeing what happens. If you let it keep growing, eventually they stop growing because they're in their own waste products.
I think
Just extending the urban metabolism.
maybe the researcher was referring to just basic tons of carbon dioxide emitted versus what could be absorbed. And so if you remember that over half in this country, I think it's over 90% of the humans live inside cities. So this is where we're emitting the bulk of our emissions. And how do we emit that? From our heating of our homes and water, from our transportation. That's the bulk of it, right? Vehicles and buildings. And so you have a very high concentration of vehicles and buildings that are all consuming fossil fuels. And so there's no way the urban forest alone is going to balance that emissions. In fact, we know that globally we're out of balance. There's no way the entire forests and not even the oceans keep up with our emissions. That's why CO2 is increasing in the atmosphere. We actually exceed through our emissions, primarily from cities, what the entire planet can absorb. So we do have to get back in balance, we have to sharply curtail those emissions. And we can also, as this conference is emphasizing, make changes to our forestry practices and farming to pull in some of that CO2.
So I'm sorry, go ahead. I'd just like to add to that we have globally vastly underestimated the potential of soil sinks. And even people like soil scientist Ratan Lal, who is a leading practitioner at Ohio State, has increased his estimate of the potential of soil sinks over time until recently he said 75 to 100 parts per million if soils were properly managed. And we've got something like 5 billion hectares, 12 billion acres of grasslands alone that have been degraded, that are bare, that are oxidizing carbon, they're not sequestering it. And if we were to turn that around, and we do know how to do that, and it's not expensive, and it has all kinds of benefits for communities and food production and water cycles. If we were to do that, there is the potential to pull all of that legacy carbon out of the atmosphere, not just on grasslands, but jungles and tundra and a variety of land types that we have across the world. So Yes, emissions reductions have to happen, but they're not. And so we've got to do something else as well, and may they all go to zero tomorrow. But we now have possibilities that we hadn't thought of before. As our colleague Tom Garreau has pointed out, the IPCC and the UN and global organizations have not yet incorporated soil sinks into the climate equation. This year, the FAO has declared it the International Year of Soils, and we are starting to make some progress because we're talking about it. We have a long way to go, but we can do it, and we can do it fast if we only get to it. So, next question, please.
As far as, I just want to add, as far as limiting carbon in the atmosphere, there's something we can all do, and we can start right now when we go home. We could just stop eating meat and other animal products because they contribute greatly to climate warming. But I actually have some questions for our city arborist.
Okay, before you go there,
Yeah.
I must intercede here because this is a cultural meme that we need to work on. It is absolutely true that most commercial raising of animals is a carbon source, and it's a very damaging one. But ruminants are keystone species in a grassland ecosystem, and grasslands will not do their optimal storage of carbon without ruminants grazing. Whether we eat them or not is another question. We can or not.
Anyway, I think we should discuss this when it comes up, but just because you had made that comment, I just wanted to add one thing to it. But I actually have some questions for the city arborist, very limited questions. First of all, some of our large elite institutions in Cambridge are dendricidal maniacs. Harvard treats trees like cut flowers. You know, they plant them one month, they cut them down the next month. They cut down centuries-old trees because they want to do a building project. And I just wonder, isn't there any legal recourse for the citizenry? I mean, I know it's all happening on private property, but it seems to me the global commons sort of makes a mockery of that kind of limitation. My second question is, if you could explain what happened with the trees on the Common, Cambridge Common, and why they were taken down. And my third question is relates to trees. I've purchased 2 trees, and then I got a replacement tree from the city. The 2 trees that I purchased were girdled, I guess. So one of them died after about 20 years. It did pretty well, but then it died. So you very nicely gave me an American elm. I'm thrilled, but I would rather that tree not die. And the other linden tree is girdled also, so I expect it's going to die pretty soon. So again, I think these trees should be treated like trees that live 100 years and not that only live a decade or so. So I wonder if you could comment on my 3 questions.
I think so. So in regards to development on private property, there's the ordinance is in place. It was established before I got here. You know, obviously, I try to encourage folks not to remove trees on private property. But you know, there's only so much that I can do as city arborist, and you know, with my jurisdiction as being in the public right of way or municipally owned land. So there's not much I can do with that. Cambridge Common, that has been a 20-year process where there's been a lot of people involved with the whole project of upgrading the common. The 21 trees were removed within the past month or 2. It was part of a plan, where there was some realignment of paths that were taking place. So some of it is aesthetic, but also a good portion of those trees were in poor condition, and I believe the majority of them, were Nora maples. I know there's a couple lindens and a few others that are in really poor condition. So, it's not nice to see trees get removed like it did. But at the same time, the common's going to look really nice. We have over 100 trees going back in, and we're really diversifying the common. Because if you look at it, it's tired and it's mostly Norway maples. So it's gonna have a lot new. It's gonna be reinvigorated. It's gonna look really nice when it gets all wrapped up either this fall or next spring. And the last question, call my office about the 2 trees in front of your house, and we'll see what we can do about maybe addressing those girdling roots. I try to work extensively with the planting contractor to make sure that girdling root issues are dealt with at the time of planting as best we can. But it is, like I said, it's a challenging job, and I'll do my best to try to mitigate that issue and make sure that the contractor is trying to do their best to resolve visible girdling root issues at the time of planting.
Thank you.
We have time for another couple of short questions.
Hi. I really liked looking at the map where you could see where the water flows to when it floods, and I just thought that was really interesting to think about. I'm actually from Gloucester, and so the question I have, there's a reservoir in Gloucester with natural streams running into the reservoir, and then the streams run from the reservoir down under a main road, and the road borders salt marsh. It's like a small area of non-marsh or like high marsh and then salt marsh and then a bay. And I'm looking at the area right beside the road and I'm thinking, oh, this is like a really flourishing place and water runs under the road, but there's a lot of like road runoff, just like petroleum or whatever, exhaust and stuff, and you could see it in the water. And I'm thinking, oh, I wish I knew what to plant to help this ecosystem to begin to flourish again, and also once things start to grow, what plants will help to filter that runoff from the road and protect the ecosystem from the road. And so I'm wondering if any of you can tell me where to begin, like what would be a species to plant first and what species help to filter road runoff when you're talking about developing ecosystems right next to roadways.
You.
Biochar?
I'm a sort of non-expert. I'm a landscaper. I go to an organic landscaper. I go to a lot of conferences.
Could you do this at a mic, please?
I'm not trying to steal anybody's thunder here, but I've actually been. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually gone to a lot of conferences on this. You should Google phytoremediation, which they do, unfortunately, a lot more of in Europe than we do here. But one thing to start with is sweet fern, Comptonia, is a native fern that supposedly has an awful lot of bioremediation, phytoremediation qualities. And there's a lot of other plants, and my brain is old, and it's hard for me to memorize them.
It's a fern, but it is called sweet fern.
Okay, so the botanical name is Comptonia. And apparently there are other ferns that actually also, that ferns actually have some remediation qualities, but I'm not an expert, so you have to look it up. But there are industries that actually do this.
Just to address the issue generally of road runoff and protection of wetlands, in many cases, if you have the right arrangement of land, you can, it's expensive, but you can install a stormwater retention basin and plant it with cattails, and you create a little mini wetland that serves as the kind of the buffer for the road chemicals, salt and silts and oils and so on, to protect the wetland. The wetland, the stormwater retention basin will release the water slowly, and you may periodically have to excavate that little mini wetland, but at least you're not hurting the actual native wetland.
Hi, I'm Barbara Passero from Meadowscaping for Biodiversity. Is it up? Is it loud? Okay. Oh, yeah.
Move
Closer. Okay. I'm Barbara Passero from Meadowscaping for Biodiversity. Thank you all for speaking. Thank you, Eric, for speaking on this. Eric inspired me to start a project where we're helping students to learn about biodiversity through building a meadow. We're repurposing, it's Eric's word, repurposing a lawn to build a meadow full of native plants, only native plants. And it's a summer program right now. We're doing the spring in Boston. We're working in Waltham and hopefully at LaSalle College and some other places. close by. And what this program does is it involves students. It involves students in going outside, being outside. Brings them outside. They get their hands dirty. They work on the challenge of improving nature, improving the present situation. And I know it sounds like a commercial, but Adam, thank you very much for saying about Doug Tallamy, who was my other
Thank you, Barbara.
expert.
Are you going to be around the tables?
I am.
People will be able to come in and speak to you
Right.
and learn more about your exciting program.
Thank you very much.
I think we're about out of time for questions, but speakers will be around, and there are lots of people at the tables, and there's all kinds of interesting stuff out there. So let's take a break and try to make it back in about 15 minutes. Thank you very much.